Hey there, I'm Sarah Hodges, and this is Executives Uncut. This is a podcast where we provide solutions for the corporate cycle of hell. And today we're talking about delegation, something that can really interrupt corporate efficiency. And I'm here with Fergus Connolly, performance coach, author, TED Talk speaker, as part of our Concepts of Chaos series. Welcome, Fergus.
Good morning, Sarah.
Fergus, you are joining us from a hotel room, right? Because you're where?
I'm in Charlotte. I'm on your time zone actually for the first time.
That's right. Usually you're doing it
Yeah,
this at like 6 a.m., like a crazy person, which is, I mean, really
crazy
cool.
early.
You are an
Yeah.
early bird. But so tell us a little bit about what you're doing, because I think that has a lot to do with the theme of delegation.
Yeah, so I'm in Charlotte for a few weeks with the Carolina Panthers, just consulting, advising for them. And I guess, yeah, it's a perfect example of delegation in one way. The head coach and staff, uh, looking for help and being able to support them and delegate tasks.
Mhm.
So yeah, timely topic, Sarah. Well done.
Awesome. So what kind of things do they delegate to you when you're doing this?
Well, a lot of it is, helping identify the tasks that need to be delegated to other people and organizing it so that you can sequence tasks. And,
Mhm.
a lot of it, like we're going to talk about, is you realize as well there are many things that you can't do everything. So it's being able to apportion resources to the best people who can complete those tasks and make sure then that everybody's working together to achieve the objectives that the head coach wants,
Mhm.
so that when the season starts, which is I think it's probably only about a month away now, it's coming on
Yeah,
fast. And then of
really
course
fast.
you've got this coronavirus situation. So the reason that I'm in a hotel room for a few days is to quarantine and to get tested so that I'm COVID free before I start work with players and staff, because of course every team is a bubble, and
Yeah.
health is such a priority. So it's interesting. Like, I mean, it is refreshing to see how seriously the NFL is taking testing and making sure that they're trying to look after the health of their athletes and their staff and everybody involved in the team. So it's a small price to pay being stuck in a hotel room for a few days
Yeah.
alone.
Yeah, I love what you said about it being a bubble, though. I think that's true. I think a lot of organizations run that way as well, which is it's really interesting because something that I think is a common theme with delegation, when delegation is a problem for a leader, it really comes down to trust. They struggle to trust other people to handle that particular task, and so it speaks highly of you that the NFL is trusting you with strategy that will ultimately help them reach their end objective, which is to succeed this season.
Yeah, well, it's interesting because at the minute, because of this, situation with the virus, everything has been shut down. So people coming in and out, there are fewer people involved and around teams and players. So it is far more serious situation for teams, and it's just created, I guess, a little bit more pressure. But even with the NBA, so some of the teams and coaches that I was working with, I wasn't in the NBA bubble, but they again all went to Disneyland, shut it down, made sure that nobody was coming in and out. And I guess when you're on the outside, you don't realize how seriously these organizations take, the health and wellness. So it is good when you can see it from being involved, seeing how seriously the organizations take Corona and take health of their, like I said, both their staff and their players. It's not just about the players only, because there's so many staff involved.
Yeah. Well, that is kind of cool to get a little bit of an inside look. Gosh, shutting down Disneyland, that's pretty crazy. But
It's
yeah,
crazy, yeah. But like, I
there,
mean, but as you say, from a delegation perspective, it's something that was something that I had to learn, and it was a difficult task learning first of all to be comfortable with delegating tasks to other people. So I appreciate it more, and you understand it more when when you're working with people and they're delegating tasks to you or asking you for help.
Mhm.
That it's a really interesting process, and every leader has to go through it at some stage.
Right. Well, do you think that I wonder sometimes if certain leaders see delegation as a sign of weakness. Do you think that's possible?
Oh, I think so. I think initially anyway. I think because we all become very good at a particular task early on, and we specialize in it perhaps, and that's something that we've worked really hard at. And then as you move to management or leadership positions, you might have to delegate even that most prized task that you studied and worked so hard for, and now you got to hand your baby off to someone, so to speak. And so there's that whole process, but you're learning other skills, but you still want it done the way that you've always done it, and all of those
Yeah,
things. So there is absolutely, there's I think there's a little bit of ego involved as well,
maybe.
a little bit of insecurity. Maybe this person will do it better than I, or maybe they won't do it as good.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, those are stages that I think everybody goes through at some point in their career.
Yeah, I agree with you. The whole idea of, oh, well, they're not going to do it as good as I would. And then, I see this especially with emerging leaders when they're just learning to delegate
Yes.
and they've been promoted because they did that job really, really well. And then it's really scary for them to lead somebody else to do that job, maybe not quite as well, but still okay. And I think they think it reflects poorly on them, right? They need to be the best at everything. They need to be perfect at whatever it is that they're doing. And I think that there's a fear of losing control, right? Because doing that job well was their safety net.
Yeah, and also I think I try and frame it with some people more as looking upon it more as mentoring, because I think
Mm,
that's an easier way to present it, that you've got somebody else coming through that you're going to mentor, but also on the other hand you have to focus on other tasks, learn other tasks. So it's not that you're giving away or losing anything, it's just freeing up time for you to learn and develop other skills. And as
absolutely.
as we spoke about, delegation is a skill to learn. It's not just a hurdle,
Yes.
or it's not a negative at all.
Mhm.
It's a skill to learn who to delegate, when to delegate, and how to organize it.
Yeah, and yet I think that so I have a lot of clients that come to me and say, I'm bad at delegating, help me delegate. But those underlying, reasons like, perfectionism, needing it to be done perfectly and not being able to trust that someone else will do it perfectly, trust, not being able to trust in them that
Hmm.
it will be up to your standards, fear of letting go of control, ego, all of those things can really get in the way. And I think that they're a little confused and we need to address those before we actually talk about the strategy of delegating.
Oh yeah, and I have many memories of asking someone to do something and maybe it not being done the way that I wanted to do it, and just getting so caught up in myself without recognizing, okay, maybe I didn't give them the best guidance, maybe I
Mhm.
didn't give them the best example, maybe I didn't explain which parts of this project were the most important. And it takes time. Well, it took me a lot of time to realize how to delegate properly and what other people needed from me as a leader to be able to do their job and their skill set well.
Mhm.
And yeah, a lot of it comes down to trust. Now, on the other hand, also, I've delegated tasks to people and they've come back and done them far better than I could have done them.
Yes.
And at the start, when you're, like you said, when you're emerging, you get insecure and you go, wow, they're really good. But as you
Mhm.
mature, get older, you actually you learn the value then of directing people and letting them be creative and coming back to you with things that are far better than you could have done. And that's really rewarding. But it's a
Yes.
maturity thing. You gotta be mature.
Gotta be mature. You have to be enlightened. To
Exactly.
be evolved. But I mean, it's true. I mean, there's a lot of acceptance that goes into it too. I often tell my leaders that if your staff can accomplish a task at 80% as well as you can, that's a huge success. If they could accomplish it 100% as well as you can all the time, then they might have been the one promoted to your job, right? Which isn't a fear thing. Again, you want them to do it better than you, but I think more often than not, what I see is that staff will do something differently than what you expected, right? So if you, and that's cool because if you give them creative liberties, if you say, listen, here's kind of what I'd like to see, but if you can do it better or you can do it faster and still just as good, then hey, by all means, do it. My intern, Justin, actually, who produces this podcast, he does this kind of stuff all the time. He has the clarity of distance. He hasn't been doing it forever. So he comes in with a fresh new look and says, hey, we can cut out these 8 steps, right? And do it this way. And the end result might look a little bit different, but it doesn't mean it's worse. Right? I think that openness is really important.
No, in many cases it's better. And I think, one of the things that, I particularly had to learn was, I wanted things done a very particular way perhaps there's perfectionism. But then, when somebody comes to you with something that actually is better than you even thought of or had considered, that's when you realize, oh, hang on a second, maybe before I've been too stringent in, how specific I've been. And that, I think, it's an important learning curve, a learning experience. So again, it's about being able to delegate the tasks that others can do to free up to give you that freedom to continue to make progress as well as a group. And it also allows greater conversations between the group and the unit. And sometimes what happens is we tend to become myopic and just focused on ourselves rather than looking at it for what is the benefit for the group, the organization as a whole. And that's something that you just need to catch yourself from time to time and realize it's not always about you, believe it or not. It's about what's the outcome for the organization, and
Yeah.
is this moving in the right direction?
Yeah, and so when you do get over it, when you mature, right? You get over that hump of the ego and the trust and the control, and you're ready to delegate. What are some tips that you give your clients to start executing and start actually delegating?
Well, one of the things is being able to, and it's a good test. Like, I mean, do you know the capabilities of your staff?
Mhm.
Do you know what they can do and what they can do well, and being able to accurately, distribute the tasks to them, and always keeping in mind, like, what is the goal, what is the objective, and
Mhm.
it was a coach mentioned to me as well. There's a very thin line between delegation and abdication. So when you delegate, that doesn't mean that you abdicate responsibility. If you're delegating a task to someone, you still have to maintain the responsibility for that task. You can't blame somebody else. It's really, really interesting watching leaders as well when they delegate a task. If it's not, perhaps done well enough, do they take responsibility? Because they should if they delegated it. You don't delegate responsibility. You might delegate the task. And then if it doesn't come back, well, then that's your responsibility to help upskill, inform, have a communication with, and understand, okay, why did it not come back? Or why wasn't it done the way that you wanted to? Maybe they just weren't aware of certain things. Maybe there were resources that were missing. Maybe there were small skills that they didn't have. And so it's a really interesting process. But the most important thing actually for me is recognizing that it in itself, delegation is a process. It's not just I delegated this task, that's it. It's a constant iterative cycle of improvement, so that you're
Yeah.
constantly improving. It's not just one and done. That's really, really important, I think, for leaders to remember.
Yeah, I love everything about what you're saying because first of all, it's about seeing your staff, knowing them, tuning into them, understanding their values, understanding their strengths, understanding their weaknesses. I mean, don't give a task to a staff member where you know that's your weakness, that's a weakness for them. And if you don't know if it's a weakness for them, that's probably a good place to start, right? Is to evaluate what their interests are, what their strengths are. And then as opposed to delegating tasks according to job description, delegate tasks according to strengths, which is really cool because you have everybody working more as a team instead of just in their own little, isolated vertical, which is a different way to approach it, right? But it can broaden everybody's abilities.
No, I say that all the time. It's about responsibilities, not roles.
Hmm.
Because just because somebody has a title doesn't mean that they have all of the skill sets that one might associate with that title. I think
Right.
the idea of roles is a little bit outdated. It's just too linear, too structured. And
Hmm.
so being able to assign tasks, maybe to multiple people, maybe to teams,
Yeah.
complementary people across departments, whatever it might be, it's about the best combination of responsibilities and skill sets to
Hmm.
achieve the task. And one of the things also that it's an interesting test is if it's not going well, how quickly does your staff member come to you and raise the flag? Because if they don't come until the
That's a good
very
point.
end, does that mean that perhaps they're a little bit scared of you? Does that mean that they don't feel comfortable coming to you at a challenge? So if you give them a
Hmm.
task to be done in 2 weeks and they come to you the day before and you know that they're working hard, but they're way off point, there's a failure in communication there. And to be honest with you, it's your fault. It's not
It's
theirs.
your fault.
It's really your fault. Like, I mean, I've had that situation come to me, and it was like little bit of a shock to me. This person either felt intimidated or didn't feel comfortable coming to me, and really made me look at how I delegated tasks to them.
Yeah.
And also, there's huge value, though. I found great learning in being able to help people overcome challenges and achieve that outcome that I was looking for, because that's where, again, the learning, the mentoring, the teaching comes in.
Yeah, and I think that I love what you're saying about it's your fault. I call those hashtag boss fail moments. I also have hashtag mom fail moments, and I have those all the time where you're just like, oh, boss fail, because you're not going to do everything perfectly. But I think that you can really prevent people getting too far off track if you start the conversation in a way that's a conversation and not a directive. I mean, there comes times in life, especially in delegation, where you just have to give a directive, right? You have to get a job done. But even that can still feel like a conversation. You can say, "Hey, here's the ultimate objective, right? Here's some tasks that need to be finished that are important to accomplishing that overall objective. How do you feel about taking this on? Once it's completed, what do you imagine that would look like to you? You know, and
Yeah, and I
and
think,
thank you for taking it on, right? I like show gratitude for them taking on the responsibility way before the task is done, and say, listen, like if at any point you're feeling, uncomfortable with it or confused, come back to me. We'll have a chat like this and figure out how to get back on track. You know?
yeah, and I think it's really clear, or really important as well, to make it clear, this is either quality or time sensitive, because when people understand that it's a time sensitive thing, they'll get it done within that time frame. It's not that you're going to allow quality to suffer necessarily, but that they clearly know, okay, that it's deadline critical. In other cases, then it's a case that, look, however long this is going to take, this needs to be done to the best standard possible. We're going to review it and do it again, or improve it, so that we, and just making that clear, because that very often causes a lot of issues where somebody says, oh, I didn't know that it was critical, it had to be at this date, or I didn't know that, I thought you wanted it as soon as possible. Like, that's a comment that you will get from time to time, as
Yes, they don't
opposed
know what
to
you value. Hmm.
exactly. So
Yeah.
that, having that conversation with people. The other thing too is, I always try personally to have a template, or an example of what I was looking for,
Yeah.
so that people clearly know the standard. I try never to give somebody a task that I haven't done, and have an example to show them, so that they can improve on and build on. But
Oh,
like, I mean,
honestly though, I do that all the time. I give people tasks that I've never done before all the time, and it's their projects, and I'm like, you know what? Here's kind of what I'm thinking I'd like at the end. Here are some resources. Play. It's your sandbox. Show me something cool. And I think that's really empowering for people. So it depends on how committed you are to a specific outcome.
well, it depends. Yeah, it depends on the task. If it's an SOP or standard operating procedure, you probably want a template, or you probably want an
Sure.
example. If it's a creative project,
Hmm.
you actually probably don't want to give too much specific directions, so that you allow the people, usually a group or team, to be as creative as possible.
Yeah. One tip that I just popped in my mind that I want to give anybody listening is that I have whenever I give a creative project to like my interns that's going to become an SOP or a standard operating procedure, I have them design a workflow as they're creating it and then continue to iterate on that workflow, and then they'll switch jobs and test each other's workflows for a week. And that's a really fun way for them to make sure that this has now become standard operating procedure, and they can continue to iterate on it and improve it and make it cooler, but ultimately they're really in charge of the creative process from beginning to end, which I think is empowering and fun.
Oh yeah, like, I mean, yeah, the last thing you want are robots who aren't going to think for you.
Right.
And that's why
Yeah.
empowerment is so important, as part of delegating the outcomes.
Yeah. We should maybe return to this later and talk about micromanaging, because I know there's a fine line between micromanaging and delegation, but I feel like, because I mean micromanaging is almost as bad, and I feel like
Mm.
micromanaging is delegation where you've half given them that task, but you're still going to control it, and get too involved in the how. But let's make another
Yeah,
podcast
like,
specifically
yeah,
for
no,
micromanaging.
yeah, like I said to some of the guys, I said micromanaging is like bringing your mother on a date. Like, I mean, it's like having somebody looking over your shoulder. But again, it is the corollary. It's the difference between, empowering and then having somebody looking over your shoulder and just stifling any creativity or work.
Yeah, that's hilarious. It'd be really funny if I'm just imagining right now my husband bringing his mom on our first date. Anyway, probably wouldn't have gone so well. But so let's get to tips, because we could talk about this all day, but I want to make sure people have very specific takeaways. So, quick tips. Prioritize your goals and objectives first, then sequence your tasks, then delegate who is most suited for that task. Oftentimes, we just have a task come up, we want to throw it at somebody, but really you need to understand how that task orients itself into the overall goal and objective, and know where it comes in the sequence, and then know who to delegate it to. Based on who's most suited. And a lot of times we're like, oh, I'm just going to do it really quick right now. It's faster. Really set aside time to teach, because it's going to save time later. It may take more time in the short term, but it'll save time in the long term. And lastly, recognize the abilities and preferences of each of your staff members. And if you don't know their abilities, their preferences, and their values, get to know them, have some conversations. All right. So for our coaching challenge, all right, this week, choose just one task to delegate. Just one. Take time to teach your staff how to do it, and be open to the fact that it might be done at 80%, or it might be done better or even differently than you originally thought. But different doesn't mean worse. All right. Fergus, anything else you want to add?
No, sir, you've nailed it again.
Really? I was reading all of that, you guys. That's why. I'm just a very good reader. P.S. My daughter has started reading flashcards. She can read 2 words on the flashcards, or she can recognize them. I think that's pretty awesome, and the perfect way to end our podcast. All right. Thanks, everyone, for tuning into this episode of Executives Uncut. If you enjoy this content, subscribe, share with someone who could benefit, and visit hodgescoaching.com and click on podcasts, where you can find new episodes. You can also find us at Hodges Coaching on social media, pretty much everywhere. We're on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, soon to be Amazon Podcast. I forget all of them, but basically, if you want to find us, just search for us and you'll find us. I'm Sarah Hodges. Thank you so much for listening today, and I will see you next week.